Good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome. Thank y'all for coming. I'm really grateful for y'all being here tonight. Such a nice bunch of folks I know, and a few that I don't, but not many. I just wanted to say, if you want water, we have water over there. Brian and Zach work for us, and they're great dudes. And Lindsay is inside the building, and she's willing to stay open for a little bit, but she'll probably join us here in a few minutes. We're just real glad y'all are all here. So would you like to take the introductions from there?
Thank you, Oliver. This is Oliver Franklin, by the way, who is site director of the Elisabet Ney Museum and our host for the evening. My name is Jeanne Van Ryzin. I'm the editor of Sightlines, which is a nonprofit online arts magazine. Thank you very much for coming. This talk is a multiple collaboration between Sightlines, Elisabet Ney Museum, Big Medium, and also Preservation Austin, where this is an official West Austin studio tour event. So if we had punch cards for how many stops you made at West, you would get one tonight. I'm very delighted to have this nice eclectic mix of people to talk about place and space and placemaking and preservation and arts in the city of Austin. Just to give you a brief introduction, and then I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do and sort of what their professional practice is. This is Miriam Conner, who is a community engagement and coordinator with Forklift Danceworks company, and also on the City of Austin African American Resource Advisory Commission. This is artist Sara Vanderbeek, who has also started a nonprofit gallery in her home called DORF. And this is McKnight, who is an environmental conservation program manager with the City of Austin's Parks and Recreation Department. And this is Oliver Franklin. So if you'd each like to, we can just go this way, and if you could just tell everybody what you do and what kinds of space making and place making and things that you do as in your professional experience.
I'm Miriam Conner again. I am a community engagement coordinator for Forklift Danceworks. I am also working on, so for Forklift, we go to different pools and we are educating the communities and the people that go to the pools about the lifeguards, about the maintenance staff, and basically showcasing the neighborhoods and finding out the histories of the neighborhoods that exist or in the past or present in those spaces. So we bring the art conversation to what basically policy and public space, creative space making together in one organization. So we're also, we've got funded by Art in Public Places to do a art installation at Givens Pool. So we are reaching out to the community of East and Central Austin that have lived or worked or has history at Givens Park and Pool to create a piece that will be at Givens Park. Also, the African American Commission, we obviously, so D1 since 1928 has been the Central for Black History in Austin, and so that is another space, but it's not a physical space, it's like, it's a place. So we'll go into the difference between that later, but Black creatives are leaving Austin and providing and getting and maintaining space for us to work in and show art is important.
I'm Sara Vanderbeek, and I have notes because I've got to right now. I'm just starting being able to speak in front of people, so it helps me to do this. All right, so I'm an artist, curator, estate manager, and I'm the director of DORF, which is an experimental art space in the two-car garage studio of my husband and my house in South Austin, near Stastny and Manchac. After graduating college, I moved to New York and I worked at Christie's Auction House as a specialist. I learned a lot about the art market, art handling, client relations. In 2008, I moved to Austin for a job at Flatbed Press. I was hired, the recession happened and lost my job, and I was hired in San Antonio. I stayed in Austin to live, but commuted to San Antonio. I was the curatorial assistant at the McKnight Art Museum, where I fell in love with exhibition curating and design and working with collectors. In addition to my professional art career, I've always worked as a practicing artist, predominantly large oil portrait painting commissions. I stepped down from the McKnight to have more time to pursue my art work, and at the same time was invited to remotely co-curate a $7.2 million public art program in San Antonio for the University Health System. We built a collection of more than 1,500 works by more than 400 artists all over the state, country, and world that was really focused on mostly regional art and representing communities in San Antonio. Throughout my entire time in Austin, I had a studio at Art Post on East Cesar Chavez, which housed over 40 artists. In 2014, the property was acquired by a developer who developed the rent overnight and caused the exodus of 90% of the artists in the facility. As a response, my husband and I started the 2-year process of converting our garage into our new studio. I miss being surrounded by the art community and was fortunate in 2015 to be invited to become a founding member of the artist collective on the east side, ICOSA, where I served as treasurer and then president until 2017. I stepped down from ICOSA to be home more with my baby daughter. And last year, we started DORF. We're celebrating our first birthday. Happy birthday, DORF. And DORF was definitely born out of a necessity for space to work, to show, and to build community, especially in South Austin, where there's just not a lot of space for this type of work. So that's me.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Kim McKnight, and my official title is Environmental Conservation Program Manager for the City of Austin Parks and Recreation Department. I work in the Planning Division. I do wear quite a few hats these days, although I will say that historic preservation planning and cultural resource management is my passion. I have been in the field of preservation for about 2 decades, which is hard to hear myself say that. But and I see a lot of familiar faces, specifically from my time as at the Texas Main Street program at the Texas Historical Commission. I'm seeing a lot of folks from my historical commission days, so it's nice to see you. I do a variety of things at the Parks Department, and I think I started off as the first person to focus on historic preservation there. It wasn't even a full-time person. I was sort of a part-time temp. And in my time, I was able to convince the Parks Department that not only do we have like really obvious historic resources like what you see here today, the Ney, but we have an abundance of historic resources that may not be designated, some archaeological, some vernacular and maybe modest, and that they needed to be identified and inventoried and managed and planned. I guess one of the projects I'm most proud of, I've worked on quite a few, but one of the projects I'm most proud of is the Historic Cemeteries Master Plan for the City of Austin. And we were having a real struggle with managing our municipal cemeteries. We have 5 of them. And to take a project, as many of you who've been in public sector work or maybe in the artist world know, I started that in 2012, and it was only really this year. The plan was adopted in 2015. We finally finished the historic Oakwood Chapel restoration in fall of 2018, and very happy that we brought on the artist, Jennifer Chenoweth, this year, 2019, to be our museum site coordinator. So I couldn't be more excited about seeing that intersection of preservation and art that's about to take place at the cemetery. I don't know if this community is really aware of how phenomenal the programming is going to be there, and pretty exciting. But I will say that planning is, for me, one of my major passions. I do love the cultural resource management end, but I really love the ability of a plan to galvanize the community and to sort of buy into a process and understand what's possible. And I do find that that's probably one of the keys to our success at the Parks Department, is that it's not enough for me, sort of, Kim, to be standing there saying, this is important. But when you get the community excited about a vision and council hears that, and then they start to, I was part of this process and now I'm going to advocate for this funding. So I've been able to really see the power of planning to galvanize a community. So I'll stop there.
Okay. By the way, whenever y'all hear, if it's too quiet, be sure to holler, okay? Because I get really nervous when I host events and and I worry about people being able to hear. So anyway, I'm Oliver Franklin, and I think probably a whole lot of y'all already know me, so I don't really need to go very long. But I'm the site coordinator here at the museum, and it's been a really exciting 6 years because we were really, really quiet when I started here, and actually closed, and it's just been such a joy to bring people here and kind of change the profile of the place and make it a lot more of a site that people come to. I'm reminded of how, like, in the museum business, we talk about, for a long time there, they were talking about becoming a destination, and when I started here, I was like, I don't want to be a destination, because a destination is a place you go to, right? I wanted to be a hub, which is a place you go back to, you go toward, you go into instead of out to. And so that's kind of what we've been working towards, and we've been one of the ways we've been really doing that is through collaborations with people like all the people that we've worked with, like for instance Sightlines and Preservation Austin and all the groups we work with, and Plain Air Austin, and who else do I see here? Well, obviously I was going to say Big Medium last, and Forklift and all the other groups that we work with. And then of course Big Medium, and we have really, I mean, we get along so great with those people. I love your collar there, Shay. I know. I'm sorry. Well, this was. I mean, I'm sorry to you too. This is sort of what a great idea if we did it this way instead of the way we usually do it. So maybe we'll move it back next time we do this. But I also wanted to say real quickly, I got a master's in geography at UT. I wrote for the Daily Texan for 10 years. That's kind of something I'm supposed to say, 10 years. But anyway, my master's, I've changed majors a number of times. And my master's thesis was about wall murals in Austin and their role in the community. And what I found so fascinating was what really came to mind was the definition of landscape versus real estate, and how those really refer to the same thing, but they're completely different ways of looking at it, and how landscape belongs to the people and real estate belongs to the person with the paper. And what got me really thinking about that was the very, very, very beginning days of the Hope Gallery. Before it became the Hope Gallery, it was like this crazy thing where you had people painting on the walls, and then they would of this excrescence that these developers thought it was okay to leave behind, and then they'd paint a mural, and then they'd get painted out, and then over and over and over again. And then one day there was a sign on there that said, "Why do you keep painting on our walls?" And I was like, I wonder who that was. Was that the muralist, or was that the property owner? Who said, well, whose walls are they? And so that's kind of my organic approach. That got me a job in History Museum in the Valley, in the Rio Grande Valley, and did that for 3 years, and then came back to Austin because I grew up here and I just didn't want to be away. I mean, I enjoy the Valley a great deal, but and that taught me a lot about public history and dealing with the community on a real intimate level. And so here I am. Thanks very much. See you later.
Well, to pick up on some of the things that I think everybody has sort of touched in their introductions, what is the difference between, just say finding a space for art or finding a space and actually creating a community? What's the difference, as you were saying, Oliver, I'll have you each answer this, between being a destination and a hub or a community? And I think in all of your practices, you could be just a cemetery, or you could have an art program for it. You could, be, you could have just your own studio, or you could turn it into a gallery and do other things. So where do you feel like that line is, and what in your practices have you done to sort of explore that and exploit it, maybe? Yeah, I guess we're just going to keep it.
So I took notes on the questions. because it's a lot. So space and community are two different concepts. Community cannot exist without space, but space can definitely exist without community. That being said, if you think of a space when you're typing, it's a void. And so space is different than place because place brings in space has the 3D, it's an actual physical space. But then if you bring in place, it brings in the person and the experiences that they've had and the values and the culture and the beliefs and the religions, and that makes a place. So when talking about finding a space where rather than recreating a community place, that's where the line is totally skewed on meaning, purpose, and authenticity. It's intention of space that makes it community.
That was a really good answer. I'll talk about it from a personal experience with running DORF for 1 year. I started it out of seeing a need for more spaces to engage with the arts community, and now my brain just keeps going further and further out into the possibilities of what a residential space, gallery space, community space, hub, definitely interested in getting people to come back every time, can look like. And to me, it has a lot to do with the programming that we're doing and the type of events that we're having. And we want to reach as broad a community, internet, as broad as possible, but definitely focused in Austin. So, for example, our last event before West Austin Studio Tour was a fundraiser for the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, which was a show of 8 artists either on death row or have been executed in Texas. And it brought a whole different community to our space, people that I've never seen before, and mostly not from the art community, which I thought was really amazing and interesting. And so, that's something that we are very interested in. We had about 200 people at that event, and we raised over $3,000 for the Texas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty.
And mind you, this is in a South Austin ranch home that you did this whole community event. So.
So it's been a while since you asked the question, but that's okay. I think I can answer the way I was thinking.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, what's the differences, and to pick up on Miriam's more philosophical take on it, is space can be a void and place can be a community.
Well, I think one of the things I've come to notice and sort of acknowledge as a historic preservation person, you start your career off, at least from my perspective, of really caring about the built environment and ensuring its preservation. So that's very much what we're focused on, is the capacity for these built, the built environment, whether it's a building or even a modest wall or just a 1930s historic restroom in a park, that this layer is important and it tells us something. But to be honest, in my work over the years, I've come to really understand that it's the people, and it's the activity, and it's the interpretation, and it's the storytelling, and it's the programming that is such a critical component of the work we do. And it is I think art is one manifestation, but it's also foodways, it's theater, it's storytelling, it's capturing memories, it's helping people make new memories. And so it's why we work really hard with our planning efforts to ensure that we are try our very best to ensure a legacy of programming in that space. I've had some successes and failures, to be quite frank. How many of you have been to Sparky Park? Anyone? Good. Well, that's a wonderful facility that I was able to work on with the neighborhood, who's very interested in art. But I have been concerned that we're not using that place to its full potential, and it's this gorgeous, historic 1930s North Austin substation building in 38th and Grooms, just over here. And it's a fantastic building in a park. It's very limited. But we were very focused on restoring the building, and we knew the neighborhood had a strong interest in programming. But there's always been this lingering thought, like, is it really living up to its potential? I think that we've learned from some of those lessons, and we've stepped in to ensure that enhanced operations, maintenance, security, programming is part of any plan. So the cemetery was probably the first example where we said, basically, you've got to restore this building, and then you actually have to have staff that you invest in. It's really easy for the city to invest in capital projects. We've got to fix this, it's public works. But rarely do they follow through to implement the critical piece, which is that if you're going to invest in this space and then just turn around and walk away for it to fall apart again, why bother? And so I basically, I argued very strongly that we could not let that happen, and we were fortunate it was very difficult, and it's very hard to advocate for programming. And then of course, once you do it and you get like just even one temporary person in there, just something, or a partnership with a volunteer group, people start to understand that potential. Where Peace Park Conservancy representatives are here, Charles is here, that was another plan in which we were very big advocates of the potential for programming, which they were already doing through volunteer work and fantastic fundraisers, but the idea, and then they're doing a really great interpretive planning process right now, which I think is going to be fantastic. Brush Square Master Plan was just passed by council. We're actively working to try to expand the fantastic programming we already do with the museums there. And we're saying, once again, we can restore this square, but if we just leave it here and we're not actively programming it, what is it about? Like, it's just so meaningless. It's just this meaningless space. And so those are some of the lessons that I've learned through my work in preservation, is that it's not enough for us to ensure that the building is restored and that a lot of our buildings do have museums, staff associated with them, but so many of our spaces do not. And so really ensuring partnerships and making sure that we have our own in-house staff to activate these spaces has been so important.
Let's see, I wasn't texting anybody there. Could somebody give me a pen? I didn't think to bring a pen up here. Anybody got one? Oh, thank you, good. Just because I was taking notes actually and realizing I didn't have a pen.
Okay. I've
yeah,
got an extra pen.
Yeah, well, okay. I was looking at my kid's Instagram feed. No. That's what he does. Okay. Oh yeah, I didn't want to take the only one. Well, I was just thinking that I just sort of drew the connection there that when you were talking earlier, Miriam, that places like, places to space is like places like where the voice of the community, it's like where the community's voice is heard is in place, where space is a place. So then you got space here, and then you got the real estate angle, which is just the money and the title, and then you have the community angle, which makes it a place. So it's like money or real estate or a place, right? And place is driven by the voice of the community, and then programming ideally strengthens, listening to your talk, strengthens the voice of the community in that place, or it can or it may not. I mean, some places obviously have their own voice and don't need any help getting it out there, and Austin certainly has had a history of spaces that work that way. But it's also really exciting to be able to bring a voice to a place, and that voice being kind of tuned to the community and trying to give that place a voice, and that would be by listening to the community that surrounds and loves it, I guess. And one of the things, it's sort of interesting because one of the things we've really striven or strive to do here is there's so many artists in the world. There are, gazillions of artists in the world, and many, at least a gazillion of them are pretty good. But what I find really exciting is being able to actually participate in those voices, those artists. I mean, I look at art as kind of like the voice of a person in whatever medium that is. It's not like oral communication, but it's not written communication. It's like a visual communication or a spiritual kind of intuitive communication. And so what I find really exciting is to be able to participate in that voice by really focusing on people that I know. Artists that you know, and you get to know their voice, and you find their voice to be particularly compelling, and somehow sort of consistent with your own, one way or another.